Hey guys, tonight we are stepping into a world where time does not tick on a wristwatch or buzz from a phone. Instead, it rings from a bell, high above, echoing across damp rooftops and crooked cobblestone streets. It is 13th century England. There are no schedules yet, no synchronized moments. The sun tells the time when it bothers to show up. The roosters guess, the bells toll irregularly, and no one truly knows how long anything takes. You, of course, would not survive long, not because it is dangerous, though there are certainly enough chamber pots and ill-cooked stews to cause concern, but because there is no reliable way to know what time it is. You might wake before dawn thinking it is midday. You might wander to church, only to find the doors locked and the monks still asleep. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. I always love hearing where you're tuning in from. Post your location and local time in the comments. Let's see who is drifting off the earliest. Now, dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You begin in a modest village tucked along a bend in the countryside. The roofs are thatched. The air smells of peat and damp wool. You trudge through a sleepy lane, past a woman sweeping hay from her doorstep. She nods at you, not because she knows you, but because it is morning. Or it seems to be. Somewhere in the distance, a bell rings. Just one clang. No rhythm. No second chime. You pause and wonder if it meant anything. The monks, you are told, ring it to signal prayer, but no one really agrees on what they mean by it. That is the problem. No one is sure. Not really. Time, in this village, is more of a suggestion than a system. You milk the cows when the sky lightens. You sleep when the fire burns low. You pray when the bell rings. If it rings, and if it does not, well, God understands. You walk through the outer wall of the abbey, where the brothers move quietly between stone buildings. They wear thick robes and carry baskets of bread. They glance at the sky often, as if it holds a clock. One monk, older and rather hunched, is known for squinting at shadows on the ground. He declares the time by how far his own arm's shade stretches across the path. It is not particularly reliable. And so, within the monastery, a few minds begin to tinker. One, a monk named Oswin, is especially bothered by lateness. He does not trust the sun. It disappears too often. He does not trust the bells, either, since Brother Reginald once rang them an hour early and sent the entire abbey into confusion. They fasted when they meant to feast, and the kitchen had not even finished boiling the oats. Oswin wants something better. He wants a way to measure the passing of hours that does not rely on guesses. He dreams of something mechanical, something with gears, something that rings by itself. You walk with him into a dusty outbuilding filled with strange bits of wood, lengths of rope, wheels that do not turn yet, and small lumps of metal that clink when you step too close. Oswin has no blueprint. He barely has tools, but he has curiosity, and perhaps more importantly, he has impatience. This is where the idea of the first mechanical bell begins. Not in a laboratory, not in a castle, but in a cold shed with no proper roof and one very determined monk. Oswin talks to himself as he works. He mutters about weights, levers, and tension. He points to pulleys made of old cart wheels. He tests a string made from braided sheep gut. You offer no advice? You do not have to. He is used to talking to someone, even if it is just the dust motes. Historians still argue whether Oswin truly built the first working model or if another monastery beat him to it. But many agree that something began in that abbey, a way of thinking, a desire for time to be something you could count, not just feel. The first attempt does not work. The bell pulls too hard and falls off its hook. The rope jams in the pulley. The gears refuse to spin in harmony. One flies off and nearly hits the baker's apprentice, who was there to deliver grain. But the effort continues. Oswin scribbles notes on scraps of parchment, sometimes on the back of old prayer sheets. He sketches towers. He thinks in circles. He listens for rhythm in everything. You walk back to the village and pause as the single bell rings again. This time, it chimes twice. A pause, then one more. Maybe that means something. Or maybe someone just leaned on the rope. But soon, it will mean more. Soon, the sound will carry weight. And time, once just a rumor in the sky, will become a voice you can hear. The bell echoes long after it rings, bouncing between the stone walls and thatched rooftops. It startles a hen in the churchyard and sets a toddler to clapping. You walk along the muddy path, letting your boots sink slightly into the earth. The morning has officially begun, or so the bell says. Not that anyone agrees on what time it really is. Before the clock tower, time flows like a lazy river. It meanders, it puddles, it speeds up without warning. There are no minutes, there are no seconds, there is only light and dark, hunger and fullness, silence and sound. People rely on the sun, of course, but the sun is a moody guide. Some days it hides behind thick fog. Other days it lingers long into the evening, tricking farmers into working past supper. Then there are winter mornings when it barely rises at all, skimming the trees like a distracted child. In towns and villages, daily life runs on habit. The rooster crows, the market opens, the blacksmith hammers out a rhythm that you begin to associate with noon. The baker's bread is ready when you can smell it from the end of the lane. Everyone moves by feel. Everyone learns the signs. It is not lawless. It is simply flexible. But that flexibility comes with its flaws. The church tries to keep order by ringing bells at canonical hours. Matins, lauds, prime, terce, sext, none, vespers, and compline. You try remembering all those in order when you are half asleep and there is no sunlight to guide you. The monks ring the bells by watching hourglasses, shadow lines, and the subtle shift of light through the windows. Or they guess. A lot of guessing happens, though they do it with a very solemn expression, which makes it feel official. You remember the day the bell rang late for the midday prayer. The cook had already served lentil soup, and half the brothers were halfway through their bowls before realizing they had not yet prayed. They stopped chewing, looked guilty, and finished the soup anyway. That evening's prayers went on a bit longer, just to balance things out. Historians still argue whether most villagers paid close attention to these bell routines or simply used them as background noise. But for the monks, time was meant to be sacred. It guided their days, structured their silence, shaped their work, and when the bell failed, they noticed. You stroll past the market square where vendors begin to set up. There is no official start time, so stalls open whenever their owners arrive. One man sells apples. He is always early, except on Wednesdays, when he forgets to wind his pocket sundial. Yes, pocket sundials are real, the kind you hold in your hand, a line with the sun, and then squint at while hoping the shadows behave. Most people abandon them in winter, when the sun becomes unreliable and the device tells you nothing but try again later. You stop by a cooper's shed and watch as barrels are stacked in lazy towers. The cooper hums softly. He has no idea what time it is. He does not need to. He will stop when the light fades or when he runs out of staves. The same goes for the shepherds out in the hills. They return when the sheep look tired or when the sky turns orange. There is no specific hour, just a feeling, a kind of sixth sense shaped by years of habit. In this world, people live in long moments. They wake slowly, eat when hungry, rest when the tools grow too heavy. Time is measured in actions. How long does it take to milk a cow? That is a good stretch. How long to walk to the stream and back? That is a trip. The duration of a song, the burn of a candle, the cooling of a pie, these are the clocks people trust. You pass a small boy balancing a stick on his nose. He wobbles, drops it, laughs. He tries again. His mother calls to him from the doorway, but not because it is any particular hour, just because it feels like the right moment. And that is what strikes you most. How natural it all seems. No one rushes. No one frowns at a ticking minute hand. There are no alarms, no scheduled meetings, no voices saying you're late. But slowly, change stirs, because even this peaceful drift has its problems. Meetings are missed. Deliveries are delayed. The church cannot always agree with the market, and the market cannot always agree with the sun. People show up early. People show up late. And nobody knows who is right. You return to the abbey, where the same monk who squints at shadows is now muttering at the sky. Clouds have covered the sun again. He sighs, holds out his hand to feel the temperature, then shrugs and walks away. This is not a science. It is a performance. Inside the abbey's side chamber, a few brothers gather around Oswin. He is sketching on a scrap of parchment, talking about a wheel that moves a lever, that pulls a weight, that turns a bell. His listeners nod, not because they understand, but because they like the way he speaks. You watch as he fiddles with a few bits of metal. They click together uncertainly. The bell rope hangs from a hook in the corner. Oswin glances at it, then back at the gears. He mutters something about time being stubborn. He is right. It is stubborn, and up until now, it has ruled gently, but without precision. That is about to change. The air inside the abbey is cool and smells faintly of soot and stone. You step softly through the arched hallway, the sound of your boots muffled by straw mats and silence. In a small chamber tucked behind the chapel, Oswin hunches over a table. The parchment before him is covered in smudges. A half-drawn gear curls beside a broken ink blot. He does not notice you. He is muttering again, scratching at his neck, fiddling with a piece of bent metal. He pauses every few minutes to listen, not to you or to the wind, but to the bell outside. It has not rung in hours, or perhaps it did, and no one heard. That is the problem. The monastic schedule depends on certainty. The rule of Saint Benedict requires regular prayers. At dawn, mid-morning, midday, mid-afternoon, sunset, night, but without a clear, shared signal. Prayers start late or overlap. Some monks arrive too early and wait, fidgeting. Others rush in mid-psalm, breathless and disheveled. One even tripped over his robe last week trying to catch up. The abbot sighs often these days. He stands by the refectory and stares at the sundial. He says nothing, but his eyebrows carry the weight of a man whose dinner has grown cold too many times. Oswin sees this, and unlike many of his brethren, he sees it not as divine mystery, but as a technical problem, a matter of coordination. You sit on a nearby bench, watching him sort through a box of iron scraps. Springs, coils, wedges, each one has a story. Some are salvaged from broken cards, others from the back of a blacksmith shed. One piece looks suspiciously like the handle of a chamber pot. But Oswin is not picky. Historians still argue whether Oswin had any formal training, or if he was simply self-taught. What is clear is that he does not stop. Even when the chapel bell rings off cue, even when Brother Reginald claims that clocks are unnatural, even when the candle wax runs low, Oswin keeps adjusting, sketching, building. The current method is a weight-driven wheel, a stone tied to a rope that slowly lowers as it turns a gear. The idea is that this downward pull can power motion, that a sequence of wheels can be arranged so one moves the next, which moves another, until finally a bell is rung. You try to imagine this. It sounds like alchemy, or mischief, but Oswin's hands move with intention. Today's challenge is friction. Too much, and the gears stall. Too little, and they slip. The teeth grind, jump, and sometimes shatter. Oswin sighs, chews his lip, and goes back to his notes. Meanwhile, the monks stumble through the hours. Prime overlaps with terse. Meals are missed. One novice prays the same psalm twice, just in case. A visiting bishop asks what time vespers will begin, and 3 monks give 3 different answers. The cook has stopped waiting for bells. She now uses her nose. When the porridge smells right, she serves it. If someone complains, she points at the sky and mutters about clouds. You walk through the scriptorium where the scribes work, heads bowed over parchment. One glances up and says, "Is it sext yet?" No one answers. Outside, the sun hides again. Shadows deepen. The bell rope sways slightly in the breeze. And still, Oswin works. He winds the weight again, lets it fall, watches the gears turn half a revolution before jamming. He groans softly. Then he smiles. A tooth has caught. That small click gives him hope. You lean against the wall, staring at the shape of the bell tower outside. It is not yet fitted with Oswin's device. That comes later. For now, it stands empty, a tall shell waiting to speak. Back in the chamber, Oswin is adjusting the escapement, a little arm that rocks back and forth to control motion. He thinks if he can make this part steady, the whole machine might flow. He sets a candle beside it, not for light, but to judge movement. If the gear ticks in time with the flicker, he knows he is close. Someone enters behind you, a younger monk, eyes wide, hands tucked into his sleeves. Will it work? He whispers. Oswin does not answer. He winds the weight, lets it drop, and the gears groan into motion. There is a faint turning sound, a clunk, and then a pause. It does not chime, but it moved. It moved further than before. The younger monk grins. It's like a little sermon in iron. Oswin blinks, surprised, then nods. Perhaps it is. You leave the workshop and step into the cloister. A few monks pace slowly, their steps unsure. No one knows exactly what hour it is. Someone guesses late afternoon. Another says early evening. You glance at the sky. It could be either. But soon, if Oswin succeeds, no one will need to guess. A bell will ring, not by hand, not by guesswork, not by shadows. It will ring because gears turned and weights dropped and someone believed that time could be shaped. The next day, the sky wakes in layers of gray. Fog presses against the abbey windows like a heavy curtain. You step through the cloister with your cloak pulled tight, your breath rising faintly in the cold morning air. Somewhere nearby, you hear a low creak followed by the sound of metal tapping stone. Oswin is at it again. You find him outside the smithy, knee-deep in a barrel of scrap. He pulls out a long iron rod and squints at it as though trying to hear what it wants to become. Behind him, a boy turns a grinding wheel while whistling off-key. Sparks dance and then vanish. Oswin is not the only one thinking about time, but he is the only one who seems convinced he can capture it in metal. You ask how it is going. He smiles, the kind of smile that suggests something has finally clicked, but he is not ready to say it aloud. Inside the abbey stone shed, his workspace has grown more elaborate. The original pile of tools has become something closer to a workshop. Gears rest on wooden shelves. Strings dangle from ceiling beams. A cracked hourglass leans in a corner, its sand mostly spilled but still respected. You notice something new. A small frame assembled from iron rods, held together with wooden pins and twine. It stands waist high and holds a system of gears connected to a drum. The drum spins slowly, controlled by a weighted rope, and as it moves, it shifts the gear teeth one by one. Oswin calls it a verge and foliate. The verge is a vertical spindle. The foliate is a horizontal bar with small weights on either end. Together, they control how fast the drum spins. This, he says, is the secret to regular timekeeping. You lean in and listen. The gear teeth click softly, one at a time, almost like breathing. Historians still argue whether this particular escapement design came from Oswin or from another monk in a different part of Europe. Some claim versions of it appeared in cathedral towers. Others believe it was adapted from earlier water clock technology. But most agree that something like this was present in the first mechanical clock towers. Oswin now believes he is close. The abbey remains unaware of just how important his progress may become. The other monks grumble about the noise. Someone accuses him of stealing parts from the kitchen scale. Another worries aloud that Oswin's contraption sounds too much like meddling with divine rhythms. But Oswin does not stop. He has developed a habit of speaking softly to the machine as he works, encouraging it like one might soothe a temperamental horse. You ask him when it will be ready. He shrugs. When it ticks without help. And that, you realize, is the real challenge. So far, everything needs a push, a hand to set it in motion, a finger to guide the gears. For this device to succeed, it must move on its own, held by gravity, governed by its own rhythm. He tests the device again. The rope tightens. The weight descends slowly. The verge turns. The foliate swings, and the gear teeth tick one by one. Then, a pause. A gear jams. The rope jerks. The motion stops. Oswin lets out a breath through his nose. Neither surprised nor discouraged. He resets it and starts again. You leave him there and walk through the abbey's main hall, where the other monks gather for prayers. This time, the bell rings early. Someone mistook the length of the shadow near the chapel. The novice who usually pulls the rope had overslept and another filled in with confidence, but little accuracy. The abbot's frown deepens. You return to Oswin's shed later that evening. A single candle burns low, and the shadows it casts make the gears look like dancing insects. The machine rests quietly. No ticking, no movement. Oswin sits beside it, hands folded, watching. It nearly ran for a full hour today, he says softly. Without any help. You nod. That is progress. He lifts a small metal hammer from the table. It is not much longer than a spoon. He holds it in the air, then gently touches it to the bell hanging from a wooden post nearby. The sound rings out, soft but clear. A single note. I wanted to ring like that, he says. Once for every hour. With no hand at the rope. You picture it. A bell that rings itself. A clock that speaks. Not just for monks, but for everyone. A new kind of sound that breaks the day into known pieces. You look at the gears, the rope, the foliate bar, and then you look at Oswin, who has dark circles under his eyes and a streak of soot across his sleeve, but also something rare, a kind of peace, a quiet certainty that this strange, clattering thing he has built will one day change how people live. You hear a mouse skitter across the rafters. You hear the wind scratch at the shutter, and then you hear it again. Tick, pause, tick, pause, tick. The mechanism is moving. It is not perfect, but it moves. You return the next morning to find Oswin asleep in his chair, his head tilted back and a faint snore escaping his open mouth. The candle burned down completely in the night, leaving behind a pool of wax and a scorched mark on the table. The smell of old iron hangs in the air, mixed with something sweeter, perhaps the ink used for his sketches or a forgotten apple rotting near the shelf. The machine is still ticking, slowly, softly, one gear nudging the next, the foliate swinging like a slow breath, the rope unwinding a little at a time. It has not jammed, it has not stalled, it is still moving, and each tick brings the hammer closer to the bell. You watch in silence, not wanting to wake Oswin. The bell is small, just a test piece for now. It hangs from a post cobbled together from a broken chair leg and two wooden pegs. But it is positioned carefully, and the hammer is close. Just a few more ticks. The machine ticks once more, then another, then one more. The hammer rises slightly and falls. The bell rings. Not loud, not grand, but real. Oswin stirs and opens his eyes. You tell him what happened. He blinks, sits forward, and watches the next tick. The gears continue. The bell rings again. Just once. He smiles. Not the kind of grin that wants applause, but the quiet, tired kind that says something has been made real. The Abbey has never had a clock tower. It barely has a tower at all. But the plan, you learn, is already forming. The abbot has seen the sketches. The carpenter has measured a space above the chapel where a mechanism might fit. And now that Oswin has proven the concept, the pieces can come together. Not all the monks are thrilled. Some whisper that it feels wrong to have something other than human hands ring the sacred hours. Others argue that it is divine inspiration that led to this invention, and that precision in prayer honors God more than guesswork. Historians still debate whether the first full clock tower mechanism was installed in this abbey or in a nearby cathedral. But the innovation spreads quickly. Within years, other communities are building their own versions, each one slightly different, all of them loud. You step outside into the courtyard, where the stones are still damp from last night's fog. The bell has not yet been moved to the tower, but it chimes again from the shed, and the sound rolls out over the grass. A stable boy hears it and looks up. A washerwoman pauses at the well. The sound means something now. Not a guess, not a maybe, but an hour. A counted one. Oswin joins you with a blanket draped over his shoulders. He sips a weak tea and watches the rising sun. You know, he says. Once it rings from above, they'll expect it to always ring. You nod. That is the point. After all, the consistency is what will change everything. In the days that follow, the mechanism is tested again and again. The weight is rewound every few hours. The hammer is adjusted. Sometimes the bell chimes too early, sometimes not at all. But more often now, it gets it right. People begin timing their activities by it. The cook checks her stew when the bell rings. The gardener trims herbs with one ear tuned toward the shed. A few children start racing to the chapel after every chime, pretending it's a race only they understand. Even the animals seem to notice. The rooster, long considered the village's unofficial timekeeper, now crows more hesitantly, as if unsure whether it still has a job. You sit with Oswin as he calculates how long the mechanism can run without rewinding. He believes it can go for half a day if the weights are properly managed. Perhaps more, with refinements. He dreams of a time when the bell will ring through the night, when people can know what hour it is even while wrapped in sleep. You ask him what comes next. He points upward. The tower. Not much of one yet. Just a stubby extension above the chapel, barely taller than the trees. But soon it will house the bell, and when it does, the entire village will hear it. The entire town, maybe. The idea that began in a dusty shed will become something larger, something that will ring across rooftops and into opened windows, something that tells time not just to the monks, but to the butcher, the baker, the shepherd in the hills. You look at the shed again, the ticking device, the little bell, and then you look toward the tower. It is not tall yet, but it is ready. You stand at the base of the tower that is slowly taking shape. The stone masons are already muttering about the angles. The beams creak as scaffolding is lifted skyward, piece by piece. The chapel's quiet rooftop will soon become something far more noticeable, something that calls to people rather than simply sheltering prayers. The sun glints weakly through a pale sky, lighting up the dust floating in the air like bits of spun gold. Monks pass by carrying buckets and tools, offering nods but no questions. Everyone knows now. The abbey is building a tower, not just for birds or bells, but for a machine. You climb the scaffolding behind Oswin. He moves slowly, favoring one leg after dropping a gear on his foot the previous morning. At the top, a carpenter marks timbers with a sharp knife. He measures twice, then a third time, as if afraid the wood might shrink or stretch. Oswin nods at the space and gestures toward the open square. This will hold the frame, just wide enough for the weights to drop without knocking into the walls. You glance down, imagining the ropes unwinding, the iron drum turning, the gears clicking quietly, all inside this echoing chamber of stone and timber. Building too tall, too fast, is not exactly a new idea in 13th century England. Church towers regularly collapse during storms. One cathedral lost half its bell loft to a poorly cured beam. Another had its scaffolding swept away in a sudden gust, taking a mason with it. He was fine. He landed in a hay wagon and now tells the story for bread and ale. But this tower must stand, not just for pride, not just for the sound, but for something deeper, for the rhythm it promises to the people below. The bell itself has not yet been hoisted. It still hangs in Oswin's workshop, polished now, though not by intention. The soft cloth wrapped around it was meant to protect it, but the constant movement from curious fingers has given it a slight shine. You descend again and pass through the garden, where the herbs bend slightly in the wind. The cook is gathering leeks and humming a tune that almost matches the clock's rhythm. She has started using the chimes to time her stews. Yesterday's dinner was perfectly tender, and she took a small bow when complimented. Oswin trails behind, lost in thought. He carries a gear in one hand, its teeth worn smooth on one side. We'll need to recast this, he says. Too many slips. You wonder how many gears one man can manage. He has names for them now, not official ones, just little mutterings to himself. This one's grumbler. This one never quite fits. That one squeals. The village boys have started sneaking into the abbey grounds, hoping to see the machine. One claims he saw it move without a hand. Another insists he heard it whisper. A third simply likes the sound it makes, like ticking rain. Historians still wonder why the builders chose a tower and not a table. After all, the mechanism could sit on flat ground and still function. But the answer is clear if you stand in the street at sunset. Sound travels differently when it falls from above. It stretches further. It cuts through wind. It lingers in courtyards. It feels important, and people are beginning to notice. A farmer from a nearby village visits and asks Oswin what the bell is for. When told it rings on its own, the farmer looks skeptical. So, it's a bell that knows the hour. Oswin nods, though he knows it is more complicated than that. Then it's a better priest than the lot of you. The farmer laughs. Perhaps he is right. You pass a small chapel where an older monk scratches his beard while watching the tower rise. Will the bell call us, he asks, or command us? It is a fair question. The power of sound from a high place is not just practical, it carries weight. Bells have always meant more than noise. They warn, they celebrate, they summon. Now, they will also measure. The scaffolding creaks again as another beam is lifted. The carpenter calls for more rope. The tower grows. You stand below and look up. It does not yet cast a full shadow, but it will. The sky darkens toward evening. The chimes ring from Oswin's test bell one final time before the mechanism is moved. People pause. A merchant adjusts his sacks. A child counts aloud. A dog barks in time with the bell, perhaps by accident. This is how it begins. A rhythm introduced to a place that once moved with the wind. Soon, the sound will come from above, and everything beneath it will begin to change. You return to the abbey just after sunrise. A light frost sparkles on the grass, and your breath puffs out in small clouds. The scaffolding is still up, but the bell is gone from Oswin's shed. Its absence feels strange. The workshop is quieter, though the ticking machine still murmurs along, turning gently in its corner. Now it waits for its next chapter. Today, the monks are preparing for the lift. Not a sermon, not a meal, a lift. The bell, wrapped in thick cloth and lashed to a wooden frame, has been rolled through the courtyard and rests now at the base of the tower. Ropes hang down like vines, swaying slightly in the morning breeze. The villagers have gathered too, not for work, but for curiosity. Children squat in the mud, craning their necks. A dog lies under a wagon, tail thumping every few seconds. A few women carry baskets of bread and apples, using the moment as an excuse for both trade and gossip. Oswin stands beside the bell, clutching a scrap of parchment covered in numbers. He speaks quietly with the carpenters, pointing up, then down, then up again. The lifting mechanism is simple but clever. A large wheel mounted on a frame, turned by hand. As the wheel turns, it draws the rope, slowly raising the bell inch by inch. You hear a murmur ripple through the crowd as the first motion begins. The bell rises off the ground with a groan. The ropes creak. Dust falls from the upper beams. One of the monks mutters a prayer. There is no fanfare, no trumpets or music, just a quiet tension as something very old meets something entirely new. The bell climbs higher. The rope tightens. The wooden frame holding it shudders slightly, but holds. Oswin watches without blinking. Historians still argue whether this specific moment marked the first installation of a mechanical bell in a tower that rang itself. Some believe there were earlier attempts elsewhere, though none were well documented. Others claim this was the first time the community changed its life around a machine. You watch the bell disappear into the tower. The mechanism will be reassembled above, piece by piece. The weights hoisted, the gears reset, the escapement balanced. Everything must be calibrated again in its new home. You follow the workers up the scaffolding, heart fluttering slightly with each sway of the boards beneath your feet. The tower creaks, but it is solid. From this height, the entire village spreads below like a quilt of thatch and smoke. Inside the bell loft, the new platform waits. The wood smells freshly cut. Light filters through narrow slits in the stone. It is cold, but still. Oswin kneels and begins installing the frame. The bell is mounted carefully, the hammer aligned, the gear teeth examined once more. He winds the weights slowly, fingers moving with practiced care. You hear the click of the escapement as it sets into motion. The tick returns, faint but steady. Down below, no one speaks. Then, at last, it happens. The hammer lifts, it pauses, then it falls. The bell rings. It echoes out across the abbey grounds, over the rooftops, past the trees. It does not sound different from any other bell, and yet, everyone who hears it knows. This one did not need a hand. This one rang because the machine told it to. You look at Oswin. He exhales slowly and sits back on his heels. The work is not finished. The weights must be managed, the timing checked, the platform reinforced, but the moment has passed. The bell has spoken. The crowd below erupts in quiet chatter. A few cheer, Others simply nod and walk away, as if they knew this would happen all along. The monks return to their prayers. The bell ticks again, and now, people will begin to listen, not for guesses, not for shadows, but for the clear, even voice of the tower. You walk back down the scaffolding, one careful step at a time. The wood groans under your boots. You reach the ground again and look up. The bell tower stands a little taller now, not in size, but in meaning. The work continues, the rhythm grows steadier, and above it all, the bell waits to mark the next hour. The air feels different now. It carries sound in a new way. Each hour, the bell chimes from the tower with a clear, measured voice. No longer a tool of habit or guesswork, it has become a constant, a voice of time itself. You find yourself listening for it without realizing. Others do too. A pause in a sentence, a glance to the sky, then the soft toll, once, twice, or more, depending on the hour. You walk through the village as the tower continues to grow, not in height, but in purpose. The abbey courtyard, once used only for reflection and the occasional goat chase, has become a place of curiosity. People linger longer. They glance toward the tower even when the bell is silent. It has become a companion to their day. Inside the abbey, Oswin tightens a gear. His hands are stained with oil and soot, but he is smiling more often now. The mechanism has found its rhythm. The foliate arm swings in even strokes. The weight unwinds with dependable grace. The hammer lands cleanly, sending its voice through the air like a signal wrapped in brass. You remember how this all began. A quiet frustration with missed prayers. A shed filled with parts no one else wanted. Now it chimes above you like it has always belonged there. Not everyone is thrilled. A monk with deep-set eyes and a strong opinion has been muttering since morning. He insists the tower is too proud, too mechanical. Where is the mystery? He asks anyone who will listen. Time is not a box to be wound. His concerns echo older tensions. In every age, there are those who fear precision, who feel it chips away at the beauty of the unknown, but even he glances upward when the bell rings, then adjusts his pace. The tower continues to mark the hours, and the people adjust without being told. The baker now checks the loaves when the bell tolls at sext. She used to tap them with her knuckles. Now she listens for the bell, then opens the oven. The children have turned the chimes into a game. They race from one corner of the square to another, trying to reach the end before the last ring. One boy miscounts and insists the bell skipped a beat. It didn't. You step into the market just after the 10th ring. Merchants who once opened when they felt like it now greet each other with just after the 10th or you're 2 rings late. It is not judgmental, just factual, a shared reference, a new form of understanding. The clock has begun to train its audience. Historians still discuss the influence of early mechanical clocks on social behavior. Some believe it brought order to chaos. Others think it simply added a layer of tension to life's natural rhythm. But few deny the impact. People lived differently once the hour could be heard, even if they still didn't own a clock themselves. In the abbey, Oswin adjusts the frame to improve sound travel. He tilts the bell slightly, believing it helps the chime carry further. He adds a curved piece of wood behind it to catch the vibration. He listens closely to every strike, as though the bell is speaking directly to him. You join him one evening as the sun dips low. He offers you a seat on a wooden crate and a chunk of bread that tastes faintly of rosemary and soot. The tower above rings once, then again, then a third time. It is the 9th hour. Oswin closes his eyes. It never sounds exactly the same, he says, and yet it always tells you where you are. The sky darkens to velvet. Lamps are lit in windows. The rhythm continues. The bell rings. A woman closes her shutters. A boy runs inside. A priest glances at his candle and decides it is time for prayer. Not because of the sun, not because of the shadows, because the tower has spoken. The wind picks up slightly, carrying the sound of the chime further than usual. It rolls down the hills, over the fields, past the stream. You wonder who else hears it. Someone in a cottage, stirring soup. Someone in a stable, brushing straw. Someone in a garden, pulling weeds by moonlight. Time is no longer hidden in the sky. It walks through the streets. It whispers from above. And everyone is beginning to listen. The next morning, You wake to the sound of murmuring in the square. A group of villagers has gathered at the edge of the abbey wall, staring upward, not with concern, but with wonder. The bell has just rung for prime, and though it is nothing new now, the moment still catches people in a gentle pause. The curious public is watching. Some come to hear the chimes, others to catch a glimpse of the clockmaker. A few just want to see if the tower really does ring without anyone touching it. Children whisper to each other about ghosts. An old man claims he saw the hammer move on its own in the moonlight. You walk among them, noticing the little details that have started to shift. One woman times her arrival with the fourth ring each morning. A farmer taps his pocket and says, "I'll be home by the 9th." Time, once told in the tilt of the sun or the grumble of the stomach, now has a number, a voice, a tone. Oswin steps out of the abbey doorway, his hands dusty and his tunic streaked with oil. He is not interested in attention, but he gets it anyway. A small boy runs up and asks if the tower will ring again soon. Oswin nods and smiles, but says nothing. He has learned that silence is sometimes the best companion to invention. A merchant from a neighboring town arrives with his apprentice in tow. He squints up at the bell and shakes his head slowly. A bell that knows the hour. Next thing you'll be telling me it knows the weather. He is joking, but only halfway. Word has spread. Other towns want to understand how the abbey built its clock. Some want to borrow the idea. Others just want to be the next to ring. Historians still puzzle over the rate at which early clocks spread from one community to another. Some towns resisted. Others embraced the idea quickly, commissioning towers of their own. Competition rose like the stone walls of new chapels. Oswin does not care for competition. He simply wants his clock to work, to last, to tick smoothly and strike clearly. He often listens to the bell, not just for its sound, but for its silence between chimes. He believes those gaps are just as important. You watch him explain the mechanism to a visiting scholar, using hand gestures and a stick to draw gears in the dirt. The scholar nods, though he clearly understands very little. He writes something in a small book and walks away before the 10th ring. That evening, a group of boys dares each other to climb the tower. They do not get far. A monk catches them and sends them scurrying back toward the village, laughing as they run. You walk beneath the tower as it rings the hour. The sound is rich and full. A woman in a shawl stops mid-step and closes her eyes. A man carrying a pail of milk lifts his chin and counts aloud. This tower has become more than wood and gears. It has become a pattern people follow, a comfort, a punctuation mark in the long, unmarked sentences of daily life. The abbey's bell now tells stories. It speaks to old habits and new expectations. It reminds people to pray, to pause, to gather, to rest. It has become a clock. Yes, but also a companion. Oswin still spends long hours adjusting the mechanism. He oils the gears, checks the weights, listens for strain. He has begun teaching others how to maintain it. A young monk named Ulrich shows promise. He has small hands, which help when gears slip out of alignment. You find the two of them hunched over the escapement, murmuring softly to each other. Ulrich asks questions. Oswin nods, answers, then steps aside. Letting someone else wind the mechanism for the first time is not easy, but he does it anyway. Outside, the wind picks up. Leaves scatter along the stones. The bell rings again, and the curious public, those who once doubted, now nod without thinking. It is just the hour, just the sound, just the tower, doing what it was always meant to do. In a clearing just beyond the village, a bellcaster stands with arms folded, watching the flicker of his forge. He is visiting from a coastal town known for its ships and smoke. He has come because the abbey's bell has drawn attention. And bells, as it turns out, are not so simple. You walk with him toward the tower, his boots crunching on frost and his breath fogging the air. His name is Edric, and he carries with him a leather-bound case filled with measuring sticks, pitch indicators, and a set of tuning hammers that look more like spoons than tools. At the abbey, Oswin greets him cautiously. The two men could not be more different. One is a careful mechanic who talks softly to gears. The other bellows with laughter and scratches his beard while describing molten metal like it is an old friend. Edric walks around the base of the tower, listening with one ear tilted whenever the bell rings. After 3 chimes, he nods. She sings, he says, but she could sing sweeter. Oswin is not offended. He expected this. Bell casting is an art, not just a craft. Each bell has its own voice, shaped by thickness, curve, and the temperature at which the bronze was poured. Too thick and it dulls. Too thin and it cracks. A perfectly tuned bell can resonate for minutes. Historians still discuss the origins of the tuning process used in medieval bell making. Some say it came from cathedral choirs trying to match chimes to chants. Others believe it was pure accident, a cracked bell that sang just right before it broke. Here in the abbey, Edric sets up his tuning spoons and strikes the bell gently at various angles. He frowns, he smiles, he frowns again. Oswin watches, arms crossed, saying little. The sound's true, Edric says at last, but the balance is off. She swings too soon, hits a hair early. Oswin nods and disappears into the tower. Minutes later, you hear the hush of the mechanism winding again. The foliate bar swings. The escapement clicks. The hammer lifts with more care this time. The bell rings. This time, Edric grins. You walk with him through the village as he explains bell tuning to a group of curious children. He tells them how bells have personalities. Some are moody. Some are bright. Some hide their true voice until the wind is just right. The children ask if bells can talk to each other. Edric laughs. Only if someone listens closely. One boy claims he heard the bell say his name once. Another says it sounds like his dog barking in a tunnel. They all agree it is the best sound in the village. The bell's voice is more than musical. It is emotional. It tells the hour, yes, but it also tells stories. It marks weddings, funerals, feasts, fasts. When the sound rings differently, people feel it, even if they do not know why. You pause at the edge of the square. A woman carrying baskets stops walking. She looks toward the bell tower, lips parted, as though waiting for something. The bell rings twice. She nods and continues. The abbey has started to keep a log of chimes, not just when they ring, but how they sound. One monk writes, "Morning bell soft, felt like rain." Another records, "Evening chime cracked against the wind." Odd but not unpleasant. It becomes a kind of poetry. Oswin studies these notes, not because he believes the clock has moods, but because he understands that people do, and the bell, in all its predictability, still carries feeling. You return to the tower that evening. The sunset stretches gold across the stones. Edric packs up his tools and shakes Oswin's hand. "She hold," he says, "as long as she's respected." Oswin nods. Always. The bell rings one final time before nightfall. It sings across rooftops and fields. The dogs quiet. The children stop their games. Someone begins to hum a melody that almost matches the chime. And you realize then, the bell does more than keep time. It keeps company. In the weeks that follow, the bell becomes a rhythm not just for the abbey, but for the entire village. You walk through the muddy lanes and hear people refer to time with a kind of casual confidence they never had before. At the 3rd ring, they say, "Or meet me before the 6th." No one asks what they mean. Everyone already knows. The tower does not rise any taller, but its presence grows heavier. People adjust their lives around its voice. The market opens with the 2nd chime. Meals are served by the 4th. Candles are lit with the 9th. It is not a rule. It is simply how things feel now. Oswin, of course, still watches every tick. You find him one evening adjusting the weights. His fingers move quickly. He has trained Ulrich to monitor the mechanism, but he cannot help checking for himself. The escapement has a new wobble. He hears it before anyone else does. You ask if something is wrong. He shrugs and points to the foliate. The rhythm shifted. To most ears, it sounds the same. But Oswin listens differently. He hears the tiny delays, the uneven sway, the little notes between the ticks. That night, you sit with him in the bell loft. The view stretches across the rooftops, fields, and narrow stone paths. In the distance, smoke rises from chimneys. The village is quiet. The sky is heavy with stars. The bell ticks again, soft, measured, ready. Ulrich joins you and places a candle near the logbook. He begins to write. The 11th hour rang warm and full. He murmurs as he writes. No wind, no echo. Oswin smiles. That one sounded sure of itself. Historians still explore how early clocks influenced how people perceive time. Before mechanical bells, time was elastic. Now it begins to feel like something you can hold, something you must respond to. A bell chimes, and you must act. This changes people. You notice that a group of women now meet every morning after the second ring to spin wool. They sit in a circle on wooden stools, gossiping quietly. Their spinning wheels match the bell's rhythm. One of them jokes that she cannot start spinning unless she hears it first. The smith starts his fire at the same time each day. His hammer rises with the third chime and falls into silence just before the 8th. The children no longer guess the hour. They race against it, measure their games by it, argue over who counted the chimes correctly. Even the dogs seem to notice. One lies curled near the abbey wall and raises its head each time the bell tolls, then lays it down again with a sigh. Oswin worries, sometimes, that he has made the world too rigid, that people have stopped listening to the sky. But then he hears the cook humming with the chimes, or watches a monk smile after hearing the bell ring in perfect rhythm, and he feels better. There is comfort in predictability. You walk through the village after dark. The tower glows faintly in the moonlight. Its edges blur in the fog. A man passing by nods to you and says, "It should ring soon." It does. 2 chimes, clean and clear. He nods again. Right on time. You return to the abbey, just as Oswin blows out the last candle in the workshop. He listens to the silence and tilts his head. That tick sounds proud tonight, he says. You laugh. He does not. He is serious. You walk together through the cloister. The bell no longer surprises, but it still feels new, like something borrowed from the future, something gifted to this little village, wrapped in stone and iron. And as you listen, you realize you are no longer just hearing a bell. You are hearing what it means to belong to time. The first snowfall settles quietly on the village, softening every corner, blanketing the fields in silence. The rooftops shimmer with a thin layer of frost. Even the bell tower seems subdued under the weight of snow. You walk slowly, your boots crunching along the frozen path, and you listen for it. Tick, pause, tick. The bell tower does not sleep. Oswin is already in the loft when you arrive, wrapped in an oversized cloak with a fur collar and holding a warm mug that steams gently in the cold air. His breath fogs as he leans over the mechanism, watching it with eyes that seem to catch more than most. Ulrich, bundled in layers beside him, scribbles notes in the logbook with fingers poking out from frayed gloves. You ask if the cold affects the timing. Oswin nods. Cold thickens the oil. It slows the swing. He adjusts the foliate bar slightly, narrowing the weight spread. The swing tightens. The click evens out. Historians still debate whether seasonal temperature changes cause significant shifts in early clocks. Some argue the timing drifted by minutes each day in winter. Others believe the difference was small but noticeable to those who watched closely. You watch now. The bell chimes once, sharp and clear, the sound echoing over the frosted landscape. A raven takes flight from the tower's edge, startled into the gray sky. Down in the village, the rhythm continues. Snow has slowed life, but not stopped it. The market is smaller. The voice is quieter, but the bell still calls out, and people still answer. A woman trudges past the bakery with a basket wrapped in cloth. She hears the bell and smiles to herself. It is the 7th hour. Time for warming stew and wool mittens. The children have adapted their games. No more running between chimes. Now they toss snowballs in rhythm with the ticks. They call it bell tag. If you're hit on a chime, you're it. The bell has become more than a measure. It is part of the season now. Inside the abbey, the stone walls hold the cold like memory. Fires are lit earlier. Candles burn longer. Meals are heavier. But the clock moves on. You sit with Oswin as he tells Ulrich about an idea. He wants to install a second bell, a smaller one, for quarter hours. Ulrich raises his eyebrows. We'll never stop ringing things. Exactly, Oswin replies, with a grin. You wonder whether the villagers will accept even more sounds, whether they will tire of the constant marking. But then you remember the old days, when time was loose. when people arrive late and prayed early and miss meals without knowing why. The clock has brought certainty, and even now, in the deepest cold, it brings comfort. You hear it again, a gentle chime rolling down through snow-dusted roofs, past shuttered windows, into quiet kitchens. One monk in the scriptorium lifts his head at the sound and sighs. Half the day gone already. He returns to his writing. The ink is thicker in the cold, but the words still come. Later, Oswin walks with you through the cloister. His footprints mark the snow like writing on parchment. He tells you the weights are holding well, even in the cold. The iron teeth have needed sharpening, but the mechanism has not stalled once in days. This machine doesn't care about seasons, he says, only balance. The wind picks up as you reach the tower base. You look up. Snowflakes swirl against the gray sky. The bell above waits, silent between strikes. You ask what Oswin plans for spring. Speed, he says, a tighter swing, a lighter arm, and perhaps a new face for the clock, something people can read as well as hear. You nod. Time, once a shadow and a feeling, is becoming something more visible, more shared. The bell rings again, and under its soft voice, the village breathes in time. A soft mist hangs over the village as winter begins to release its grip. The snow has not fully melted, but patches of earth appear like promises underfoot. You walk along the abbey path, stepping carefully between slush and thaw. The bell tower looms above, unchanged in shape, but louder now somehow, as if it senses the season is turning. Today, Oswin is not in the bell loft. He stands in the courtyard with his hands behind his back, watching the villagers move about. Children splash in puddles. A baker sweeps melting snow from his doorstep. Above it all, the bell continues to ring at each hour, steady as breath. You approach Oswin, and he nods at the view. They're starting to expect it, he says. You both watch as a woman lifts her head, hears the bell, and turns back toward her home. No surprise, no pause, just action, quiet and confident. Oswin folds his arms. I used to wonder if they'd resist it. Now I wonder if they'd notice if it stopped. Historians still argue whether early communities trusted the new clock towers or merely tolerated them. Some records suggest people ignored the bells at first, suspicious of their accuracy. Others point to village charters, where the installation of a clock marked a shift toward structured life. The truth may be somewhere in between. Here, trust has come gradually. The villagers no longer check the sun or measure shadows. They listen, they count, they plan. You pass the inn and overhear a man say, I'll head out after the next bell. No mention of noon or mid-morning, just the bell. Time, in this village, has a voice. Back in the abbey, Oswin has begun work on a new mechanism. It rests on a large wooden table in the workshop, a series of smaller gears, more precise teeth, a second hammer arm. Ulrich helps him carve notches in the wood, muttering measurements under his breath. You ask what this will do. Oswin taps the center gear. Quarter hours. You imagine it now. A smaller bell ringing between the larger ones. Soft tones that fill the silence. A rhythm even more detailed, even more exact. But with it comes a question. Will more bells bring more comfort, or more pressure? Already, you hear mutterings from a few villagers who feel the day is moving faster. A merchant jokes that he has no time anymore, though the bell rings more often than ever. A shepherd says he hears the chimes in his sleep and wonders if the sheep do too. A monk writes in the logbook, the 7th hour rang so clearly, it startled me. Or, perhaps I was simply behind in my thoughts. Oswin reads this and smiles. Time does not wait, he says, but it might slow down if we listen right. You walk with him to the tower base, where he checks the weights. He listens with his eyes closed, letting the tick settle into him. Then he nods. It's still breathing. The chimes echo as you climb the narrow staircase once more. The bell loft is quieter in the morning light. The candle stubs have melted into stubby puddles. A window has been opened just enough to let in the fresh scent of thawed earth. You peer down into the village. Life moves with its usual calm. A man pushes a wheelbarrow. A girl trails a stick through the mud. No one is rushing, but no one is lost. The bell rings. Once, twice, 3 times. People move without flinching. The sound no longer surprises. It simply is, and you realize something else. Time has become not only a guide, but a comfort, a shared experience, a point of connection. In this quiet village, in this tower of stone and wood, people no longer wonder what time it is. They already know. The bell rings softly through the morning fog, and for a moment, it feels as if the entire village inhales together. A subtle pause, barely noticed, but they're all the same. You step through the cloister with your cloak wrapped tight. The stones are damp, and the moss underfoot squishes faintly. Above you, the clock ticks on. Inside the workshop, Oswin is humming. Not a tune you recognize, just a pattern that seems to match the swing of the foliate. Ulrich sits nearby, polishing a gear with a cloth that used to be part of an old vestment. He claims the gold thread gives better shine. Oswin does not argue. The quarter-hour bell mechanism lies in parts across the work table. The hammer arm is smaller than the main one, almost delicate. Oswin has weighted it with a smooth river stone wrapped in brass. It is the right weight and, he claims, lucky. You ask when it will be ready. Soon, Oswin says, but I want the first strike to feel like a sigh. He does not mean soft. He means deliberate. You step out into the village again and find the pace of life has shifted once more. Tasks now happen in segments. The blacksmith hammers for 2 quarters, then rests. The baker kneads dough until the second soft bell. A boy counts his chores by the number of chimes. Clean the stables in 1, fetch water in 2. Historians still reflect on how early timekeeping changed the way people worked. Before clocks, labor flowed with the sun. With bells, it divided into tasks, into intervals, into expectations. You hear no complaints, not yet, but some villagers are beginning to joke about being ruled by the tower. A potter calls the bell my boss. A shepherd says she once ignored the chime and felt guilty for an entire afternoon. The bell, in its evenness, holds power. Back at the abbey, the quarter bell is ready for testing. Oswin has mounted it in the tower, just below the main bell. It rests in a wooden cradle, shaped to hold the tone. Ulrich winds the new weight carefully, watching the rope for strain. The escapement clicks into place. The hammer lifts. Then, it strikes. Not loud, not sharp. A small chime, light and thoughtful, like a whisper in the rafters. Oswin listens, then adjusts the hammer angle. Too quick, he says. Ulrich tries again. This time, the chime lingers. The sound drifts through the air, carried by a breeze that smells of damp earth and firewood. You wait for a reaction. In the courtyard, a monk lifts his head. A woman on her way to the well stops walking. A little girl twirls once and keeps going. They heard it. They noticed. It happens again 15 minutes later. A new rhythm has been born. The logbook records it with calm excitement. Quarter bell added, lighter tone, carried well in mist, fell gentle. Oswin smiles as he reads it. That is what I wanted. You notice that people now use the word quarter without explanation. Back in a quarter. Since the last quarter. It sounds natural, as though the tower has always spoken this way. The bells now mark not just the day, but the shape of it. Time becomes finer, more textured. No longer just big blocks of morning and evening. Now it is laced with smaller, quieter points. You ask Oswin if he fears it may become too much. He tilts his head. I used to, but now I think it's like breathing. If you never stop to notice it, something's wrong. The bell rings again. Not loud, not sharp, just right, and the village listens. A breeze flows across the hillside, ruffling cloaks and skirts as you make your way toward the tower. The early spring sun glints off the metal bell above, and the chimes ring out like a gentle wave. First the hour, then a pause, followed by the lighter touch of the quarter bell. The tones glide through the air together, 2 voices in quiet agreement. The village has begun to anticipate the quarter chimes. You notice it in their posture. A nod before the sound, a pause in motion. The blacksmith lifts his hammer and holds it midair, waiting for the light strike before continuing. A pair of women near the stream carry their baskets differently now, resting just before the next ring. Inside the abbey, Oswin stands at the base of the tower, examining the pulley ropes. He has taken to checking them every other day. The weight must fall smoothly. Any hitch, any uneven friction, and the rhythm falters. He strokes his beard and murmurs something about humidity affecting the wood. Ulrich joins him, cradling the logbook, now thicker than ever. Each day, he writes of tones, of silence, of mist, of wind. He has even begun to note the birds that nest near the tower. The chaffinch sang with the bell today, one entry says. You glance at another. Quarter bell was muffled in fog, still heard near the east field. Oswin believes these entries matter, not because the clock is alive, but because life moves around it. Historians still discuss the rise of the auditory environment in medieval villages. For many, the bell tower was the first structured soundscape. Before clocks, people lived by roosters, footsteps, and church songs. With bells came structure, expectation, a gentle kind of pressure. In the village, you see a new kind of rhythm. The children play in sessions. They run during one quarter, rest for the next. A weaver strings her loom between rings, then hums as she knots. Even the innkeeper now closes his doors with the fourth hour chime instead of waiting for the sky to fade. A few villagers have started referring to the quarter tones as the little voice. It is not as commanding as the hour bell, but they trust it just the same. Today, Oswin is testing a new refinement, a copper baffle around the quarter bell, meant to direct its sound downward. The theory is that it will carry better in wind. He installs it carefully, screws tightened by hand, copper polished with beeswax. You help hold the baffle in place as he locks it to the frame. It glints in the light and glows faintly pink. When it rings again, the difference is subtle but real. The tone cuts through the air more cleanly. People below turn their heads more quickly. A man chopping wood nods once, then resumes his work. Oswin leans over the platform rail and listens. Clean, he says, almost crisp. Later, you sit with him by the refectory fire. The ticking is far away, but always in his mind. You ask him what he thinks the bells will be like 100 years from now. He shrugs. Maybe taller towers, maybe more bells, maybe no one will need them at all. You tilt your head. Maybe time will be carried some other way, he says. But I hope they still listen. The fire crackles. Outside, the wind rustles the trees. A crow caws once, then falls silent. The quarter bell rings, and for a moment, even the fire seems to pause. The abbey's courtyard bustles with movement today. Monks shuffle between the herb garden and scriptorium, carrying baskets of lavender and ink. Children dash through the stone arches, chasing one another while trying not to be scolded. The bell chimes above, gentle and familiar, and everyone takes note without needing to look up. You pass through the cloisters and head toward the chapel, where the old priest is seated in a carved bench near the altar. His hands rest on his knees, and his gaze is tilted toward the tower. He nods once as you approach. It used to be quiet, he says. Too quiet. He means before the bell. You sit beside him as the quarter bell gives a short, steady ring. The sound glides down through the stone columns and settles around you like a breath. The priest closes his eyes. Now I don't forget, he murmurs. You understand. The bell does more than mark time. It shapes memory. It grants rhythm to things that would otherwise drift. Meals, chores, prayers. But not everyone feels the same. A few monks have begun to mutter again, not loudly, not often, but with a kind of tired suspicion. They worrying the bell is taking over, that people follow it more closely than scripture, that they trust its rhythm more than their own. One monk confides to you, I used to pray when I felt called, now I wait for the bell. Is that better? It is not an argument. It is a question. Historians still write about the tension between mechanical time and spiritual time in early religious communities. Prayer had once followed the body. Hunger, rest, sunlight. With bells came something external, something less forgiving. Some embraced the structure, others missed the freedom. Oswin hears the murmurs too. He does not defend the tower. He simply winds it. You find him on the tower steps, adjusting the guide rails that help the weights fall evenly. He works in silence, then looks over his shoulder. They forget the bell only tells them what they already know, he says. You walk with him through the abbey garden. Bees hum, leaves rustle. The air smells of damp soil and rosemary. The bell chimes again. The priest in the chapel turns a page in his book. The baker pulls her bread from the oven. A child counts the chimes and says, 5. And the world keeps moving. In the village, the change is even more apparent. A small shop has painted a bell on its sign, and under it the words, "Open at the 3rd." No need to explain. Everyone understands. The tower has become a kind of sun. Fixed, trusted, quietly powerful. But with that power comes weight. Oswin shares his worrying over cider one night. If the clock stops, what will they do? You remind him that they lived before it. He nods. But they didn't live like this. You watch the mechanism wind again. The weights rise. The gears tick. The hammer lifts. The bell rings. And time, once wild and wandering, finds its voice again. Morning breaks with a pale light spilling over the hills. A low fog clings to the village rooftops, softening every outline. You step out into the quiet and wait, as you always do now, for the sound. Tick, tick, pause. The bell rings once. It rolls down the slope, settling gently against the walls, slipping through shutters, brushing over rooftops. You notice something new. A pause before motion. A subtle stillness across the square. The people are not just hearing the bell anymore. They are preparing for it. In the bakery, the oven door swings open just after the chime. The baker does not check the sky. She simply trusts that it is time. Oswin stands just beyond the tower this morning, holding a length of chain and squinting up at the structure. A slight bend in the support beam has caught his attention. The wood is old, weathered, not a danger yet, but something he refuses to ignore. You climb up beside him to inspect it. Ulrich follows, carrying a bucket of tools and a packet of dried figs wrapped in cloth. The support is sagging from the weight of the new quarter mechanism. Oswin traces a finger along the grain and nods. We'll need a brace. Iron this time. Ulrich scribbles a note. Brace beneath eastern frame. Added weight must not pull against outer wall. It is a reminder that even precision needs support. A tower is only as strong as its quietest part. Historians still marvel at how few early clock towers collapsed despite their complexity. Some say divine guidance. Others give credit to obsessive builders like Oswin, who walked the stairs every morning, checking for tremors no one else hears. As you descend, the bell rings again. A double strike. The village stirs. The rhythm continues. That afternoon, the wind rises sharply. It rushes through the narrow streets and makes the weather vanes creak. You watch from the refectory window as the tower sways slightly, not dangerously, but noticeably. Oswin does not leave it to chance. He climbs at once, braces the gear frame with his shoulder, and waits for the gust to pass. Later, he tightens every bolt, rewinds the weights, runs a cloth along each gear tooth. The wind changes the sound, he says. The bell has to fight harder. Indeed, that evening, the chime comes later than expected, just seconds, but enough that Ulrich notes it. The bell hesitated. He writes, not weak, just thoughtful. The next day, Oswin adds the iron brace. It gleams in the torchlight. Strong, plain, quiet. The mechanism thanks him by ticking without pause. Outside, a traveling merchant arrives in the village. He hears the bell and asks what church it is calling to. A child tells him it is not calling. It is telling. Telling what? The hour, the boy replies, and the merchant stares upward, amazed. You walk past him with a basket of apples, smiling. The sound has become so normal to you, so deeply woven into your routine, that seeing someone else surprised reminds you of how special it still is. You reach the abbey steps and glance back at the tower. Its silhouette against the pale blue sky is clean and familiar. The chimes begin again, and this time you hear something else within them. Not just time, not just order, but care. This bell is not just about what hour it is. It is about attention, presence, the quiet insistence that moments matter. Oswin joins you at the gate, brushing iron just from his sleeves. Did it sound different? He asks. You shake your head. No, it sounded like it should. And together, you listen again. The village awakens under a stretch of soft, gray clouds. Rain has not yet fallen, but the air is thick with the promise of it. The stones glisten faintly from the overnight mist, and every footstep you take leaves a gentle mark on the path. As you make your way toward the abbey, the bell chimes once. It is not loud. It does not need to be. A boy crouched beside a puddle straightens. A farmer lifting sacks pauses to shift his weight. The bell does not shout. It suggests. You pass the chapel, where the older priest is arranging a small cluster of candles. He lights each one slowly, with the care of someone who measures moments by more than flame. When the bell rings again 15 minutes later, he smiles without looking up. Inside the abbey tower, the gears turn steadily. The new iron brace Oswin installed has settled nicely, adding strength without stiffness. Oswin walks the floor beneath the bells with his hands behind his back, listening more than watching. Ulrich winds the weights with smooth, practiced motions, stopping only to wipe his hands on his tunic. Oswin mutters something about moisture, makes the ropes swell, slows the drop. He pulls slightly on one of the lines, feeling the resistance. Still breathing fine, he adds, almost to himself. You glance at the logbook. Ulrich has written, "Bell rang clear despite damp. Slight echo near north wall." Historians still wonder how weather shaped the soundscapes of early towns. Some believe rain softened the bell's voice, while others think fog amplified it, bouncing tones along stone and timber. In this village, people simply adjust. A potter adds an extra pinch of clay to each pot, measuring the pause between chimes as his work rhythm. A shepherd checks her flock, guided not by the sun's position, but by the feel of the second quarter bell. You watch as she counts the sheep aloud, lifting her head every time the wind carries the bell's soft hum toward the field. You enter the scriptorium later that morning. A group of monks sits at long tables, their quills scratching softly as they copy texts. When the bell chimes, none of them look up, yet a few shift their posture, adjust their focus, and turn the pages of their manuscripts in perfect unison. The rhythm has become part of their hands, part of their ink. Back outside, the clouds finally begin to release their weight. The rain falls in a slow, steady curtain. It pats gently on the rooftops, seeps into the garden beds, and settles into the cracks between stones. You pause beneath the covered walkway of the cloister, listening. The next bell rings during the rain. Its voice is muted, like a breath beneath a blanket. But it carries. A boy runs past, soaked and laughing. That was the 8th. He shouts to no one in particular. Mama's soup should be done. Even in weather like this, the bell is not silenced. If anything, it becomes part of the moment, a texture, a thread running through the day. Oswin joins you under the cloister's arch. He is soaked from checking the tower beams again. His hair drips and his boots squelch with each step. He grins. Still working. You nod. Still heard. He looks toward the bell loft. She prefers clear skies, he says, then adds, but she doesn't complain. Later, the rain eases. Mist rises from the stone paths. Chickens peck curiously at the wet ground. A merchant shakes out his cloak and sets up his stall with quiet determination. The bell chimes once more. A soft strike, a steady sound, a gentle reminder. You hear a woman hum a tune that matches its rhythm. A man sharpening a blade begins to work in sync. A child turns a skipping rope to the tempo. This bell, born from iron and wood, now moves like weather through the life around it. It does not command the people. It carries them. And as you return to the tower with Oswin, you realize something else. The bell is no longer just heard. It is trusted. The bell tower's stones are warm to the touch this morning. The mist has lifted, replaced by thin golden sunlight that spills over the fields and filters through budding branches. The season is shifting again. You feel it in the air, in the loosened collars of the monks, in the way the children leave their cloaks at home. The bell rings clearly in this light, as if pleased with the change. Oswin stands at the base of the tower, looking upward, squinting against the brightness. He has brought out a small wooden bench, not for repairs, but just to sit and listen. Beside him lies a box filled with lengths of cord, short pegs, and an iron chisel. He nods at the bench as you approach. Today's work is watching. You sit with him, letting the sun soak into your sleeves. The quarter bell rings its quiet note, and Oswin tilts his head slightly. No wobble, he says softly. She's balanced. He says it the way someone might speak of a contented animal. Not proud, just glad. Ulrich arrives a few moments later, arms full of fresh parchment. He has decided to create a new record. Not just the sounds of the bell, but the way people react to them. I want to know if the sixth chime always makes the baker smile, he says with a grin. He is half joking, but only half. Historians still debate how much of the social shift in early towns came from mechanical timekeeping. Some suggest the bells simply replaced older rhythms. Others argue the bells formed entirely new habits. There is truth in both. But here, in this village, the bell does not feel like a replacement. It feels like a deepening. A farmer once tilled his soil until the shadows stretched. Now he listens for the quarter chime, then moves to the next row. A tailor, once guided by the feel of her fingers on cloth, now pauses at the hour and returns with renewed focus. She swears the stitching goes straighter after a bell strike. Oswin listens to these stories with quiet satisfaction. He keeps them in his mind, alongside the angles of gears and the weight of the pendulum. He believes the sound matters only as much as the stillness it creates. As the day stretches on, people begin to gather near the tower, not for any reason, not for a market or a sermon. They are simply drawn to it. One woman brings a spindle and spins wool as the bell chimes beside her. A man whittles a spoon while sitting on the well's edge, nodding slightly with each tick. You notice someone has carved a small outline of the bell into the wall near the abbey gate. Beneath it, the word here. It is not graffiti. It is gratitude. Oswin chuckles when he sees it. That bell's more popular than the abbot. That afternoon, Ulrich tests a theory. He places a clay bowl near the tower base and listens for the quarter chime. When it rings, he watches how the surface of the water trembles. You can see it, he says, amazed. Even if you're deaf. Oswin nods slowly. Then even silence isn't safe. You spend part of the evening walking through the village, listening not just for the bell, but for how others respond to it. You hear footsteps that pause. You hear quiet counting. You hear a door open just before the next chime. And always, the same soft sound. Regular, kind, familiar. It comes again as you round the chapel wall. A double strike this time. Someone nearby exhales. That's 7. They murmur. Almost supper. The light shifts across the tower stones. The shadows stretch a little longer. And once again, the bell has said what needed to be said, in the fewest possible words. You return to the bench just as Oswin begins winding the mechanism for the night. He moves slowly, methodically, like someone turning the key to a beloved story. The gears engage. The weight settles. The tick resumes. And all across the village, people begin to turn toward home. The moon hangs low and pale as night settles over the village. Lamplight flickers in windows, and the air carries the scent of ash and stew. You walk beneath the archway of the abbey and hear the bell strike the hour with a slow, thoughtful voice. It echoes gently through the darkness, lingering like breath on glass. The streets are quiet. Most have gone indoors, wrapped in wool and wood smoke. But still the bell rings, unbothered by silence. It speaks not to hurry anyone, but to remind them they are not alone in the night. In the tower loft, Oswin leans against the frame, arms folded, eyes closed. He listens as the mechanism turns. The weights drop, the escapement clicks, the hammer lifts, the bell answers, and the world continues to breathe. You step in beside him, boots brushing sawdust. A candle glows near the wall, its light bouncing softly off the gears. Oswin does not speak at first. He is listening. Then, he says, this is when I love it most. When it's dark and still. When no one moves, but the bell still knows. Ulrich is nearby, seated on the floor with his back against the stones, sketching a cross-section of the mechanism. His drawings have improved. What started as scribbles now show clear lines, careful measurements, little notes in the margins. He has begun labeling parts by feeling. The breath, the pause, the shoulder. He knows the real names, of course, but these feel truer to him. Historians still discuss the emotional language that grew up around clocks. Over time, the words people used to describe them became more human. Clocks did not just tick. They spoke. They sighed. They waited. In places like this one, those feelings still linger. Oswin adjusts a gear with a gentle twist. The tone shifts ever so slightly. The next strike is softer, but longer. He nods. That's better. Below, in the darkened village, the new sound finds its way into houses and barns. A shepherd pulls her blanket higher. A young man reading by candlelight looks up, blinks, and sets the book aside. The bell has spoken, not loudly, just enough. You follow Oswin down the stairs, one slow step at a time. The tower creaks slightly. The stone holds the cool of the night. At the base, Ulrich lingers a moment, hand on the wall. Sometimes I wonder if the tower notices us too, he says. Oswin laughs, not unkindly. I think it might. Outside, the village lanes stretch like quiet rivers. The glow of firelight moves behind curtains. A dog barks once, then curls back into sleep. The quarter bell rings, and you realize something beautiful. The world does not need to be loud to be alive. Each chime now is a comfort, not a call. No one rushes. No one panics. The bell is not an alarm. It is a hand on your shoulder, a breath beside your ear, a voice saying, "You're still here. You're still all right." You pass by the garden, where moonlight makes the dew sparkle. A single rose has begun to bloom, confused by the warmth. It leans slightly toward the sound of the bell. Back inside, Oswin marks a small X in the corner of his journal. It's not a date or an hour, just a mark, for him, for tonight. You ask why. He says, "Some nights deserve remembering. This one feels still enough to keep." The bell chimes again, soft as sleep, and all around you, time breathes. The village greets the morning with a slow and steady rhythm. The sky is streaked with ribbons of pale blue and soft pink. You walk along the damp earth, brushing dew from your sleeves. The bell chimes once overhead, a clean, open sound that slices gently through the mist clinging to the rooftops. You pass the well, where two women fill their buckets. One hums quietly to herself. The other stops mid-hum and says, "That's the first. We've got time." They return to their task, neither looking toward the tower. They don't need to. They simply know. At the base of the tower, Oswin leans over a small wooden crate. He's unpacking a new weight, shaped differently from the others, wrapped in soft cloth and tied with braided twine. It was sent from a craftsman in the next village. Oswin unwraps it like it's a gift, which, in some ways, it is. He holds it in both hands and weighs it carefully. More compact, he says. Same pull, better balance. Ulrich stands nearby with a list of notes, ready to test the new addition. I want to see if it helps the strike catch more evenly on the descent. They work together without fuss. Each movement between them feels like the next tick of the clock, one step followed by another. The mechanism absorbs the new weight with little resistance, and the tick resumes. Familiar, even, true. You climb with them into the loft, the new weight swinging gently as it finds its rhythm. The tower seems pleased, if such a thing can be said of wood and stone. Ulrich stands by the bell and closes his eyes. It sounds more round, he says. Oswin grunts in agreement. Less drag on the chain. That will make the quarters smoother too. Historians still note the ways innovations moved between villages during the rise of clock towers. Through wandering craftsmen, monks, and curious merchants, small adjustments passed from town to town, improving timekeeping inch by inch. Most changes were quiet, practical, but they left lasting echoes. Outside, the villagers begin their routines. A boy uses the first quarter chime to feed the hens. A weaver times her pattern changes with every full strike. An elderly man nods to the hour bell before lowering his fishing net into the stream. He doesn't need the bell to fish, but he likes the tradition. You notice something new along the side of the path. A child has drawn a large circle in the mud, divided it into sections with a stick, and placed a small stone in the center. It's meant to be a clock. Of course. The child watches the real tower, then nudges the stone a bit each time the bell rings. She smiles when it matches. Even those too young to read, too small to reach the winding ropes, are learning to carry time. Oswin watches from the steps and chuckles. That's the best kind of copy, he says. The day passes with calm purpose. The bell holds steady. The new weight does its job. Ulrich records the change with careful precision, then adds a small note in the margin. Tone feels more generous. You smile at the word. Bells do not have to be loud to be generous. They only need to be dependable. Present, a shape around which life gathers. Later, as the sun leans toward the horizon, Oswin oils the gear teeth one by one. He doesn't rush. He touches each part with a kind of reverence. When he finishes, he steps back and listens. The mechanism ticks. The weight swings. The hammer lifts. The bell rings. And across the village, doors open, fires are stoked, and voices begin to murmur about supper and evening and what needs finishing before the next bell. Time has spoken again, and everyone listens, not because they must, but because it brings comfort. The sun rises behind a thin veil of clouds, casting a silvery glow across the rooftops. The bell tower catches the light just enough to shimmer faintly along its edges. You walk slowly, taking in the soft hush of morning, broken only by birdsong and the gentle rhythm of footsteps against stone. The bell chimes once. Its voice carries easily in the cool air, clear and calm. No rush, no urgency, just presence. In the workshop, Oswin is already moving. He has spread out several diagrams across the bench, each sketched in ink and charcoal. They show a range of improvements he has been considering. A narrower pendulum arm, a slightly different pivot, a frame for a second quarter bell, though he's not quite ready for that yet. Ulrich sits nearby, munching on a crust of bread while flipping through the logbook. He points to an older entry and says, "Remember the week it rang 10 seconds late for 3 days." Oswin sighs fondly. "We never did find the reason." They laugh, but there's still curiosity in their voices. You ask what they think caused it. Oswin shrugs. Could have been the air pressure, or a mouse in the gear bed, or maybe the bell simply needed a rest. Ulrich adds, historians will probably argue about that someday. And indeed, historians often do debate the causes of mechanical drift in early clocks. Was it the materials, the builders, the wind, the uneven wear of rope and iron? The theories are many, the answers few. Back in the tower, the mechanism ticks away, unaware of the speculation it inspires. The new weight swings smoothly, and the gears respond with obedient grace. Oswin listens for any change, any hitch in the rhythm. But everything feels balanced today. The villagers move around you like parts of the same clock. A cart rumbles down the lane just after the second quarter bell. A group of children recite a counting song that matches the strike. A miller wipes flour from his sleeves and nods at the hour as it rings. You pause near the market stalls and notice how many have aligned their day with the bells. Signs now mention time not by names, but by chimes. Open, 3rd bell to 8th. Bread sold fresh after the 1st quarter. Closed 1 hour after the 6th. There's no confusion. Everyone understands. You pass by a mason repairing a wall. He chips slowly at the stone, pausing at each quarter chime to measure his progress. He says, without looking up, "The sound keeps me steady." Even the animals have learned. A horse near the blacksmith stirs whenever the hour bell rings, trained now to expect oats not by the sun, but by the sound. You return to the tower loft later in the day. A breeze drifts in through the arched windows. The air smells of grass and stone dust. Oswin wipes his hands on a cloth and leans against the wall. He says, "When I first built this, I thought people might ignore it. I thought it would just be for us." He gestures toward the village. "But it belongs to them now." You nod. It does. The bell's voice is part of the landscape, part of the breath of every day. Ulrich steps up beside you and adds, "Sometimes I think it's more honest than a calendar." He may be right. The bell rings again. This time, the tone feels softer, not because of a change in mechanism, but because of the moment, the angle of the sun, the hush in the streets, the quiet listening that greets it. And for a long moment, no one moves, not because the bell told them to stop, but because it gave them something worth pausing for. The scent of lilac drifts through the village today. Bushes bloom near the abbey wall, and bees hover lazily in the warmth of the afternoon sun. Spring has taken full hold now. Doors are left open, cloaks are forgotten on hooks, and yet, the bell rings as it always has, predictable, unbothered by the season's excitement. You walk through the village green and pass by a young boy and his grandmother seated on a bench. She holds a small clay cup of soup and points to the tower. That bell, she says, used to frighten me. Now I think it reminds me I'm still here. The boy nods but keeps drawing circles in the dirt with a stick. You hear the quarter bell ring behind you. The boy immediately shifts the circle by 1 finger width. He knows the rhythm already. Inside the tower, Oswin is repairing the wooden walkway that wraps around the bell loft. A portion of the plank has rotted from last season's rain. He pries it loose with a grunt, then calls for Ulrich to hand him a fresh beam. Ulrich does so with an exaggerated groan, pretending the wood is heavier than it is. Oswin doesn't laugh, but he smiles. Try lifting the bell next time. Ulrich's grin widens. You ask Oswin why he hasn't added more complexity to the mechanism. He pauses and wipes sweat from his brow. Because it works, he says. There's beauty in things that just work. Historians still debate when and why some towns embraced more elaborate clock faces and chiming sequences, while others kept things simple. Some believe it depended on the ambition of the builders. Others think it was about the character of the place itself. In this village, simplicity seems to fit best. The clock here does not dazzle. It does not spin or sparkle. It simply ticks, chimes, and endures. Later that day, a traveler from a distant region arrives and pauses in the square as the hour bell rings. He watches the villagers shift about their business with practiced ease. The rhythm confuses him at first. He asks a shopkeeper, "What hour is it?" The shopkeeper replies, "6th," then adds, "You'll get used to it." You pass the traveler later as he studies the tower. His brow is furrowed, but there is no frustration, just curiosity. In the abbey, the monks have begun using the bell more deliberately in their prayers. Rather than simply noticing the sound, they now allow it to set the tone. A pause before confession, a sigh at the start of a hymn. One monk calls it God's tuning fork. You watch Oswin mark a small note in his ledger that evening. 7th hour. People slower to move today. Air warm. Bell kind. Ulrich reads it aloud and raises an eyebrow. Kind. Oswin shrugs. Some tones feel that way. Outside, you hear the rustle of wine through the trees and the soft scrape of boots on stone. The village slows as the day nears its end. The bells do not urge or push. They accompany. The quarter bell rings. A girl looks up from weaving and ties off her thread. A man finishing his meal smiles and leans back in his chair. Even the dogs lying in the sun stretch and shift slightly. You return to the tower just as dusk settles. Oswin is seated on the new plank, feet dangling over the edge. He looks not at the gears, but at the sky. I used to think it was about getting the sound right, he says. You ask what it's about now. He thinks for a moment, then says, getting the silence right after. The bell chimes once more, and the silence that follows is perfect. Evening settles slowly over the village. The sky is streaked with fading gold, and the shadows stretch longer with each passing minute. You walk beneath the arch that leads to the abbey garden, where the scent of earth and flowering herbs lingers in the warm air. The bell tower stands tall above the treetops, its outline softened by the dusky light. The bell chimes. Its voice moves through the village like a ribbon on water, a soft curve of sound that bends around corners and slips through windows. You stop to listen, and so do others. A man watering his plants lifts the spout and lets it rest. A child climbing a low wall hops down and listens with her head tilted. Time, once invisible, now walks opally through the streets. Inside the tower, Oswin oils the escapement once more. It is a quiet ritual, repeated at the end of each day. The cloth, the careful tilt of the wrist, the slow spin of the wheel. Each motion has become part of the tower's story. Ulrich sits cross-legged nearby, writing on a fresh sheet of parchment. The bell sounds richer in the evening, he says. Or maybe everything does. Oswin does not answer. He hums a single, steady note that matches the pace of the ticking. Then he says, the world's softer at this hour. You walk with them to the outer landing. The village below glows faintly, lit by lanterns and hearths. It no longer bustles. It breathes. You ask if the bell has changed the people. Oswin leans on the railing. Maybe, he says. Or, be it just reminded them how to be. Historians still ask whether early clocks shaped human behavior or simply reflected it. Did bells teach punctuality, Or did people want it already? Were these towers revolutionary or inevitable? The debate remains, but in this quiet village, the answer feels less important than the feeling. The bell rings again. A monk in the garden closes his prayer book and bows his head. A baker wipes her hands on a cloth and leans against her doorway. You hear a pair of friends laughing under a tree, their voices rising just after the chime, as if it gave them permission. You climb down into the village and find a bench near the well. From here, the tower seems even taller, as though it grows at night. Oswin joins you with a small flask of cider, which he sips in silence. You think they'll remember it? He asks. You nod. Even if it stops someday, he adds. You still nod. The bell has become more than its sound. It is the shape of days, the memory of calm, a rhythm that soothes even when it surprises. A woman passes by, basket in hand, and nods politely. That was the 8th, she says. Time for the stew. She disappears down a narrow lane, her footsteps soft against the stone. Ulrich arrives next, stretching his arms and blinking up at the stars beginning to appear. Clear sky tonight, he says. Oswin mutters, good for sound. You sit together in the dim, letting the night unfold around you. No one speaks much. There is no need. The tower hums with quiet energy, its voice resting until the next quarter arrives. When it does, the chime is soft but sure, a note in the darkness, a promise that time continues, even in stillness. You look up, and for a brief moment, you imagine the bell shining just a little. The sky is deep velvet now, with only a few stars visible through the thin clouds. The bell tower rises into the night, familiar and unmoving. It does not seek attention, but it receives it all the same. You walk slowly along the path behind the abbey, your footsteps muffled by the moss that has crept between the stones. The bell chimes. It is not loud. It does not echo. It simply settles. Tonight, the village is quieter than usual. Perhaps it is the stillness in the air or the way the wind seems to pause between gusts. Perhaps it is just that kind of night. You stop beneath a willow tree and look toward the tower. A single candle glows in the loft. Oswin is up there again. You climb the steps slowly. Each one creaks in a familiar way. You know which board to avoid, which one to trust. At the top, Oswin sits beside the open window, watching the distant hills. He doesn't look up as you arrive. He knows the sound of your steps now. I thought about not winding it tonight, he says softly, just to see what would happen. You wait, but I couldn't, he continues. It wouldn't be right. Not now. You understand. The bell has become part of him too, part of all of you. Art joins you shortly after, carrying a small loaf of bread wrapped in cloth. He offers it without a word. The three of you share it in the hush of the loft, breaking it with care, chewing slowly. The bell chimes again. It's the 9th hour. Far below, a dog barks once, then quiets. A window closes. A girl hums a tune as she lays down to sleep. You speak little, but you listen, to the clock, to the village, to the silence between the sounds. Historians still reflect on what early bell towers truly meant. Were they progress? Were they control? Were they comfort? Theories stretch across pages, but none of them mention the feeling of this moment, the quiet unity, the unspoken trust between sound and stillness. You step outside onto the narrow balcony. The wind brushes your cheek like a passing thought. The stars have appeared now, more of them than before. They blink gently, scattered like crumbs over a tablecloth. Below, the village rests. Nothing stirs, but nothing feels frozen. Everything is simply waiting. The bell has not just changed how time is measured. It has changed how time is felt. A mother now rocks her baby with a rhythm that matches the quarter chime. A young man marks his evenings by when the bell rings just before his last candle burns out. Even the cats seem to sleep more soundly after a strike. You look back at Oswin. He is leaning over the mechanism, winding it one last time for the night. The rope hums quietly as it pulls the weight upward. The gears catch. The hammer lifts. The breath before the strike grows. The bell rings once more, not with fanfare, not with flourish, but with certainty. The three of you remain still, not because you must, because you choose to. The sound deserves it. Time continues, and you let it. The night grows quieter now. The stars spread a little farther, and the clouds have slipped away. The bell tower stands motionless in the hush, as if even it knows the day has come to a gentle end. You sit near the base of the tower, your back resting against the stone, warm from the afternoon sun and now cooling slowly with the night. The village sleeps. Lamps are dark, doors are closed. No more footsteps echo on the paths. The air is still, and even the leaves hang without movement. You hear the distant breath of wind brushing past the tower's edge. It whispers around corners, rustles the ivy, and sighs as it passes. Somewhere, the last quarter bell chimes. Its sound glides softly over rooftops and settles on sleeping shoulders like a blanket. There is nothing left to do, nothing to remember, only to rest. The tower will keep time for you. The bell will sing if needed, or it will remain quiet, content to let the silence speak. Let your breath fall into rhythm with the ticking. Let your thoughts drift gently, like mist across the hills. There is no urgency now, no need to reach or question. Everything is still, everything is whole. You are safe. You are held by rhythm, by stone and sky, by sound and silence, by the bell that has watched your day and now watches your dreams. Sleep. Sleep deeply. Sleep well. Good night.